The moment she said it, the air between them cracked open like a fault line under bright daylight. "Sorry, I'm in a wheelchair." Not whispered, not dramatic, just stated with a quiet honesty that carried the weight of 1,000 rejections. In that busy café filled with clinking cups, soft music, and afternoon sunlight pouring through glass windows, that single sentence froze everything. For a split second, it felt like the world leaned forward to see what the men across the table would do next. Most people had already decided for him in their minds. They always did. But what happened next would change two broken lives in a way neither of them could have imagined. If you believe kindness still exists, if you believe people deserve second chances and love can rise from unexpected places, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Acts That Matter. Stories like this only live if we pass them on. His name was Arman Halim, a 38-year-old single father whose life had been shaped by responsibility long before he was ready for it. The lines on his face were not from age but from years of worry, sleepless nights, and learning how to be both mother and father to a little boy who depended on him for everything. Arman's wife had passed away 6 years earlier during a routine surgery that went wrong, leaving him holding a newborn and a future he had never planned to walk alone. Since then, his days had been carefully structured around school drop-offs, office deadlines, grocery lists, and bedtime stories. There was no room for mistakes, and certainly no room for hope that didn't come with fear attached. Dating had felt like a distant, almost selfish idea, until one quiet afternoon when loneliness finally outweighed guilt. Across from him sat Raniya, a woman whose eyes carried both strength and exhaustion in equal measure. She had been injured in a road accident 3 years earlier when a speeding bus lost control in broad daylight. The accident took away her ability to walk and, for a long time, her belief that she would ever be seen as more than a limitation. Rehabilitation taught her how to move again, how to adapt, how to survive, but it could not teach the world how to look at her without pity. She had learned the patterns well. The slight pause after she mentioned the wheelchair. The forced smiles. The excuses that followed. She had almost cancelled this meeting, but something inside her insisted on trying one more time, even if it hurt. The café buzzed with life around them, sunlight highlighting dust particles floating in the air, people laughing at nearby tables, the smell of coffee grounding the moment in reality. Arman had noticed the wheelchair as soon as she arrived, not because it shocked him, but because it reminded him of the hospital corridors where his wife had spent her last days. Wheels, machines, quiet courage. He had learned back then that bodies could fail while hearts stayed brave. Still, when Raniya said those words, he felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not from fear of her condition, but from fear of his own unhealed past. Arman's life was already complicated. His son, Zion, was 7 years old and carried his own silent struggles. Zion had grown up watching his father juggle everything alone, and while he was a bright, gentle child, he feared abandonment deeply. Any change in routine unsettled him. Any new person felt like a threat to the fragile world he and his father had built. Arman knew that inviting someone new into their lives meant risking that delicate balance. He had promised himself that if he ever dated again, it would only be someone who understood responsibility, patience, and the reality of loving a family that came with scars. Raniya waited for the usual reaction. She prepared herself for polite discomfort, for the conversation to slowly fade into excuses about being busy, about timing not being right. She had seen it all before. But Arman didn't look away. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply took a breath, as if making space for truth, and really looked at her. Not at the chair, not at the wheels, but at her face, her posture, the quiet courage it took to sit there and be honest in a world that rarely rewarded it. What Arman did next was not dramatic in the way movies make it seem. There was no grand gesture, no heroic speech. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table, grounding himself in the moment. Inside his mind, a decision was forming, not based on fear, but on values he had learned the hard way. He thought of the nights he had held his crying son, whispering that life could still be good even when it hurt. He thought of how he had once wished people would look past his grief and see them and still trying to love. In that quiet space, he understood something clearly. Walking away would be easy. Staying present would be brave. As the afternoon stretched on, the conversation deepened, not in words quoted or exchanged dramatically, but in shared pauses, understanding glances, and a growing sense of mutual respect. Raniya spoke of her work as a graphic designer, how she rebuilt her career from her bedroom during recovery, how independence had become her form of rebellion. Arman shared pieces of his life, the challenges of single parenthood, the exhaustion, and the small victories that kept him going. Outside, the sun shifted, casting longer shadows, as if time itself slowed down to listen. Challenges didn't disappear after that day. They multiplied. Arman struggled with introducing the idea of Raniya to his son. Zion's initial reactions were cautious, his questions filled with innocent fear. Raniya faced her own doubts, wondering if she could ever fit into a life already overflowing with responsibility. Society did not make it easier. Curious stares, unsolicited advice, and subtle judgments followed them in public spaces, especially during daytime outings where visibility felt unavoidable. Every step forward came with emotional labor, patience, and moments where giving up felt tempting. But something else grew alongside those challenges. Trust. Raniya began visiting their home during the afternoons, helping Zion with art projects, turning his curiosity into creativity. She never tried to replace anyone. She simply showed up consistently, calmly, and honestly. Arman watched his son slowly open up, laughter returning in ways he hadn't seen in years. For the first time since his wife's death, Arman felt his home fill with warmth that didn't come from routine but from connection. The true turning point came one bright day at the park, where children played freely under a clear sky. Zion, watching other kids run, asked a question that stopped Arman in his tracks. He asked if people could still be heroes even if they couldn't run. Arman looked at Raniya, who was smiling softly, sketchbook in her lap, capturing the joy around her. In that moment, Arman realized that his son was learning something profound, not from lectures, but from example. He was learning that strength looked different on everyone. Life didn't magically become perfect. There were medical appointments, financial planning, accessibility challenges, and emotional setbacks. But there was also growth. Raniya found herself becoming part of a family without losing herself. Arman learned that love did not mean replacing the past, but honoring it by choosing courage again. Together, they built something steady, something real, under the honest light of day, where nothing was hidden or exaggerated. As the story reaches its quiet conclusion, it becomes clear that the single dad's next move was not about romance alone. It was about choosing empathy over fear, presence over assumption, and humanity over convenience. It was about teaching a child that love is not limited by bodies, and teaching a woman that she is more than what happened to her. If this story touched your heart, if it made you pause and reflect on how small choices can change entire lives, please take a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. Your engagement keeps stories like this alive and reaching those who need them most. Before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment the word hope if you believe kindness can still change the world. In the end, under the steady glow of an ordinary afternoon, two people learned that the bravest moments often come quietly. Not with applause, but with understanding. Not with perfection, but with commitment. And sometimes, everything changes not because someone stands up, but because someone stays. Morning light entered Arman's apartment softly, not demanding attention, just existing the way steady things do. The kind of light that doesn't rush you, that waits. Arman noticed it more these days. Ever since Raniya had become a regular presence in their lives, mornings felt less like survival drills and more like beginnings. The apartment still carried the echoes of a past life, framed photographs, quiet corners, unspoken memories, but something new had layered itself over the silence. Not replacement. Not erasure. Just addition. And that mattered more than Arman ever thought it would. Zion's routine had changed in small ways that spoke loudly. He woke up earlier now, not because he had to, but because he wanted to finish his drawings before school. Most of them featured three figures. One tall. One small. One seated, always with gentle eyes and calm hands. Arman noticed this without comment, letting the change breathe on its own. He had learned that forcing emotions only made them retreat. Letting them arrive naturally was how trust grew. Raniya, meanwhile, was learning a different kind of courage. Being independent was something she had mastered out of necessity, but being needed again was unfamiliar territory. There were days she questioned whether she was strong enough to be part of a family that already carried loss. She worried about becoming a burden, about being silently measured against someone who could never return but would always be remembered. Yet every afternoon she spent with Zion, every shared laugh, every quiet moment in that apartment told her something important. She was not filling a space left behind. She was creating her own. Outside, the world did not soften just because their home did. Public spaces still demanded effort. Sidewalks that weren't built for wheels. People who stared too long or avoided eye contact altogether. Arman began to notice things he had never seen before. Steps without ramps. Doors too narrow. Casual remarks that carried ignorance disguised as concern. It angered him, but it also grounded him. Love, he realized, wasn't just about affection. It was about awareness. And once you saw the world differently, you couldn't unsee it. One afternoon, during a school event held under a bright open sky, Arman felt that awareness turned into resolve. Parents gathered, children ran freely, laughter filled the air. Raniya was there, watching from the side, sketching quietly as she always did. Zion spotted her and waved, his face lighting up in a way that made Arman's chest tighten. In that moment, Arman understood that his son wasn't confused anymore. He wasn't afraid. He had accepted something simple and profound at the same time. That love doesn't have one shape. It adapts. It includes. It stays. That night, after Zion fell asleep, Arman sat alone in the living room. The apartment was quiet, but not empty. He thought about the promise he had made to himself years ago, to protect his son at all costs, even if it meant living half a life. He realized now that protection didn't mean isolation. It meant choosing people who taught kindness through action, not words. Raniya had done that without ever asking for permission. For Raniya, the change came when she stopped preparing for disappointment. One morning, while working near the window, she caught her reflection in the glass. Not the chair. Not the scars. Just a woman focused, present, alive in her own story again. She had spent years proving she could survive alone. Now she was learning that surviving together didn't make her weaker. It made her human. There were still hard conversations. About the future. About finances. About accessibility. About what would happen if fear returned. They didn't avoid these talks. They faced them in daylight, with honesty, because pretending would have been easier but emptier. Arman learned that strength wasn't always about having answers. Sometimes it was about admitting uncertainty and choosing to stay anyway. The day that sealed everything came quietly, as most life-changing moments do. Zion had a school assignment about heroes. He brought it home, sat at the table, and asked Arman to help. The page was blank at first. Then he began to draw. Not capes. Not powers. Just people. People who stayed. People who listened. People who didn't walk away when things were complicated. When Arman saw the finished page, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His son had already understood what took adults years to learn. Raniya watched this from across the room, her eyes filling not with sadness, but with something steadier. Belonging. Not the kind that demands, but the kind that invites. Life continued. Imperfect. Real. Busy. But grounded. And under the same honest daylight that once held uncertainty in a café, something else now existed. Choice. A choice to stay present. To grow. To believe that love doesn't arrive fully formed, it's built, slowly, patiently, bravely. If this continuation moved you, if it reminded you that healing is not loud but consistent, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. Your support keeps stories of quiet courage alive. And before you leave, comment, stay, if you believe that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is not leave. Because in the end, their story was never about a wheelchair or a past loss. It was about what happens when someone chooses not to step back, but to step closer, even when the ground feels uncertain.